You're listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient, brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. Together, we will discover how we can thrive at work, home, and beyond. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient Conversations. My name is Sebastian Calmes. I'm a wellness specialist with UKHR Health and Wellness, and your host for today's episode. In this episode, we discuss the essential topic of social well-being. We delve into defining its core elements, explore the benefits of strong social ties for overall health, and examine how diverse relationships contribute to our sense of connection. We also address the impact of digital connections, distinguish between loneliness and solitude, and share strategies for sustaining healthy relationships. To talk with me about this very important topic are my two coworkers, Rhonda Henry and Kim Releford. Rhonda and Kim, thank you so much for joining me today on this episode.
Thanks for having us join you, Sebastian. It's really good to be here.
Thank you so much.
Let's go ahead and jump in. To begin, could you both tell our listeners a little bit about your roles at the University of Kentucky and the work you do here?
I've been with Health and Wellness for about 8 years. I've been at UK for about 15. In my role with Health and Wellness, I'm one of the mental health therapists. All employees are eligible for free therapy services through our office. Folks get 5 free sessions per year. Employees or dependents can come in, or retirees, and we can talk about all sorts of topics, anything that might be work-related, home-related, and we're the folks that they meet with one-on-one.
I'm Kim Releford, and I'm also one of the mental health therapists. I've been with the university for 25 years and with Health and Wellness for about 3 years. I also provide mental health therapy and a lot of programming around supporting supervisors, and Ron and I do a healthy relationship series together and also focus on ADHD issues and a couple other things.
I'm really happy to be a part of this team with you guys. You all are doing important work for the university. Mental health, social well-being, emotional health, all very important things, especially in our modern times. Social Well-Being Month is celebrated every year in July. It was established in the early 2000s to encourage people to build healthy relationships and improve their social well-being. With this, we're focusing this podcast episode on this vital area. From your perspectives as mental health clinicians, how would you define social well-being and what are its core elements?
I think one way we can define social well-being is the quality of our connections and interactions with others. How those relationships contribute to our overall sense of purpose and belonging and emotional health is the part that goes with the well-being piece. There's some core elements like connection and belonging. Hierarchy of needs says that love and belonging are some of the major areas of our lives that we need. Feeling genuinely connected to others and having a sense of being part of something larger than ourselves. Our relationships allow us to have that. There's positives in interactions with others. It allows us to be authentic and vulnerable, and it can help us have ways to navigate conflict, support and reciprocity, and really having that sense of connection, I think, is the biggest piece of social well-being.
I'm right on board with every bit of that. The other thing I would say is throughout this hour, we're going to toss around the word relationships a lot. So I just want to also kind of expand that when I refer to relationships, we're typically talking about all kinds of relationships. I think sometimes the default is to think of a romantic relationship when you hear that word. But I think as we're talking throughout this hour, really thinking about what types of relationships, that could be a romantic partner, but that could also be our colleagues and coworkers. That could be our friends and neighbors, members of our family. We'll touch on all sorts of relationships throughout this hour because our relationships with others, like Kim was saying, reciprocity is the foundational support of our well-being.
Why should listeners care about social well-being?
Often when I'm talking with people one-on-one in therapy sessions, it seems like some of the social well-being areas are kind of leftovers. We're so busy and we're so pushed in this culture to be productive, to work hard, to parent hard, to do things at home, to go and get the things done. A lot of times our well-being is what's left at the end of the day. Do I have any energy left to connect with people? Do I have any energy left to take care of myself? I think trying to recenter that a little bit, make sure we also are getting a seat at the table. Yes, we may have a lot of responsibilities, but taking care to be attuned to our social well-being, to understand what might be areas of strain or areas of loneliness that might be coming up, may also help us refocus and bring in some things with more intention and be more deliberate in terms of taking care of ourselves, nurturing relationships, growing that area. I think it's easy in this culture for our well-being to be the leftovers. And I think it would serve us well to be able to recenter our mental health, physical health, and our social connection.
To add on to that, I think the social aspect of our lives is part of being a whole person. From a holistic perspective, the social, emotional, spiritual, physical, all of those pieces are what bring us together and make us whole as a human. Therefore, social well-being is such an important part of that. We can't do life by ourselves. From the moment of birth until the moment of death, we have interdependency and dependency on others. In order for us to have those healthy social relationships, it's important for us to spend time on them and to nurture them, to prioritize them.
Kim, you mentioned interdependency and dependency. For listeners that may not know the difference, what's the difference between those?
Dependency would be like what a newborn is for its parents. We require sustenance, we require our needs to be met by someone else. And as we grow up, we do more things for ourselves. We become more self-sufficient. Dependency from an unhealthy standpoint could mean we are so reliant on others as we age that we don't have our own thoughts, feelings, or we don't have our own desires. We may be reliant on others for how we feel and how we act, or maybe making decisions about everything in our lives. Where interdependency is the idea we are both whole people who mutually depend on each other, and we provide each other with that support. It's more about that support. It's about connection. It's about a choice that's being made. It's intentional.
And in contrast to codependency, is codependency more like dependency instead of interdependence? How does that fit in?
With codependency, the basic idea is if I'm codependent with someone else, I'm not okay if they're not okay. I'm not my own standalone person. If I'm my own standalone person with good boundaries, then I might be concerned if my partner's struggling. I might worry for them. I might want to be supportive or have a lot of fear for them. But I know that I'm okay. Like my being is okay, regardless of what goes on there. I can show up for them as a supportive person, as a healthy partner. When I've got that codependency, I start taking my needs out of the equation. I start being more concerned about if they're not okay, they're losing a job or they've got a health scare, I'm therefore not okay. We can still be connected in a very healthy way without being codependent. I think for some of us, that can get blurry if we've not seen examples of that in a healthy way.
For example, sometimes I've noticed myself get anxiety if something's happening in my partner's life where she's experiencing emotional turmoil.
We can still have concern for our partner. We want them to do well. We want to see them succeed in whatever areas they're struggling with. But I think it's that difference of knowing I'm okay and complete and I can show up for them. Again, that doesn't mean that I'm cold or unfeeling. We're not both in crisis just because one of us is going through something difficult.
You also said, I am complete, which seems that it would run counter to romance pop media.
There's so much in terms of how we are influenced and what we are taught to believe romantic love is. Before I say these things, I will say I'm a big believer in romantic love. I'm a big believer in being connected with partners and what a fulfilling part of life that can be. Our culture doesn't do us a lot of favors when it comes to expectations of what does it mean to be in a good relationship. How many times is that movie arc or that book arc going for here's the buildup and then here's the major problem and they overcame the problem and lived happily ever after. I will literally have clients say, we don't have any major struggle. We're just happy together. Good. That's the plot of a book that has a major struggle that you're trying to get through. Or for folks that are having everyday challenges, we're going to have those. And sometimes we can be swept into those romanticized versions of here's what partnerships should look like. It should be easy in these ways, or it could be hard in this way. We're going to come to a solution and solve the problem. Then we're going to live happily ever after. What we know from things like Gottman's research is every partnership is going to have some solvable problems. The hot water heater goes out. We got to buckle down and save money and replace the hot water heater. We're going to have a lot of perpetual issues. We're going to have a lot of things we come back around to. Those might be things like jealousy or financial struggles. Those might be parenting differences. We're going to have differences that are going to come back around. And with those perpetual kind of problems, our skill set needs to be learning how to manage those. We're not in the romance novel. We come to the solution and boom, happily ever after, and the sun sets on the rest of our lives. We've got to figure out, okay, we're going to disagree about how we deal with money, and we're going to run into this problem over and over and over again. How are we going to talk about it? How are we going to not be accusatory? How are we not going to fall into old defense stuff where I'm scared to talk about money? My partner's wanting to come in and solve it all immediately. I think if we can start giving ourselves some space for things like perpetual problems, that doesn't mean we're not in a good, healthy partnership. It just means we're all going to have things we come back around to. I think it really starts to shift those expectations. What do I need from my partner? Is this a failure that we've come back to arguing about money again? No, we know this is a tender area for us. We both have a lot of defensiveness about it. Neither of us grew up seeing good examples of people talking about it. When money comes back up again, it's not just saving for the hot water heater. It's all this background. It's worthiness and connection and all those things. I think being able to look at that from a little more a fuller, richer view of a relationship. Again, we're not going to have just one story arc of one problem, we solve it and we're all good. We're going to have these day-to-day issues. I think finding ways to connect, finding ways to have healthy communication about it is going to let us have a more realistic partnership that's ultimately satisfying for both of us.
I also think when you think about the idea of you complete me, I don't necessarily mean that means I'm incomplete without you. Because I think from a romantic standpoint, we dream about what we want for our lives and our partnerships and the kind of person we want to grow old with. We might meet somebody and it just clicks and they seem to meet that expectation or that dream that we have for ourselves. But that didn't mean that necessarily I was incomplete without that person. I would add, if you go back to the idea of love and belonging, from a workplace setting, we might start out in different kinds of jobs and we try different things on it, but then we find that job where it just clicks. And that's where I belong. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. I often tell people I don't have this great origin story as a social worker. Lots of social workers have wonderful origin stories. I thought I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. I got to student teacher, decided I hated it. I'm like, I hate this, Mom. What should I do? And she's like, I always thought you should be a social worker. And that's how I became a social worker. But she was absolutely right. I knew after the first couple of classes when I changed gears, because that's where I belonged. I think that happens in relationships with people too. I have a dream for myself. This is where I belong. This person helps me get closer to that dream. They help me to be a better version of myself. They are not completing me like there's something missing from me. It enhances and it makes me more.
Enhances and helps you become the best version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What are the benefits of having strong social ties for an individual's overall well-being? What kind of benefits can we see in different aspects of our well-being?
I think one of the things we know is strong relationships are a key protective factor both for physical and mental health. They can help improve mood, they can increase resilience, it can reduce stress, and sometimes even strengthen our immune functioning, just our general overall physical functioning. We know people with stronger support networks have lower rates of depression and anxiety, better recovery from illness, and live longer overall. So emotionally, we know those social ties are really giving us that sense of meaning, identity, and regulation. They help us make sense of ourselves in the world. We're relational people. We were not born to live in isolation. Whatever types of relationships from all sorts of diverse roles we might be in, they all work toward making us feel more connected. One of the things that came up consistently over the relationship series that Kim and I did in the last year was this idea of being in different life chapters. In different points in life, we can sometimes find it's easier or more difficult to make those connections. We may be in a period of life where it's a struggle to make those connections, even if the desire is there. For folks that are in a caregiving chapter, they're caring for elderly parents, or they're in the depths of parenting. Maybe somebody's went back to school to get an advanced degree. They may not be in a space where they've got a lot of room for social connection. A lot of times we'll see the fallout of that. Folks will have that desire, but they're struggling. I'm just busy. I can't see my friends the way I used to, or I can't try dating again because I've got this other stuff going on in life. And sometimes we have those life chapters that make it so we can't necessarily get that connection we want. But when we start to recognize, yeah, I'm feeling some fallout from that. I'm feeling more disconnected. I'm feeling more down. I think it is a good space for us to step back and do a little bit of assessment. And where am I with things? Am I finding myself with relationships that have kind of been put on the back burner? Think back to early pandemic, how much we struggled socially around that, not getting to see our people. Then once things opened up. We started having events and people can go and be together in space again. How many folks struggled with, this doesn't feel right. I've gotten used to being isolated. Even in those spaces when logically we know some of those things are true. We know I'll probably feel better if I see my girlfriends or if I go out and meet up with my brother or whatever it is. But it can be hard sometimes when we've gotten habituated. I think if folks are noticing they're feeling a little bit off or just feeling out of sorts a little bit, that might be a time to step back and think about this. Talk to somebody like Kim or one of the health coaches to talk through some of those things. If it's gotten off track and don't know how to get it back there. If we're feeling a little more isolated or we're feeling like we pulled back some, it can be easy to get caught up in our own head. And often what's going and rattling around in there is not usually giving us a positive spin on things. It's often the thought of, they're probably mad I didn't call them last week, or it's been so long since we've talked. Those are the things that our brain can pop up as first options of how to think about things. That's where I think either spending a little time with it or talking to somebody else to get us out of that mental funk we get in, because it's easy in isolation to believe the worst version of things going on.
Mhm. I've noticed with my clients working through things and relationship issues, I can't imagine how many times I've asked, did you ask them? Did you check that out? And then thinking about how I might ask that question or check out something I had made an assumption about, because we can run really far in the wrong direction with an assumption where just stopping and saying, what did you mean by that? Or here's what I thought I heard. Could you tell me what actually happened? Or you didn't call me last week and I thought that might mean you were mad at me. Were you mad at me? Those are things we can check out, and then we don't have to run with that assumption.
Often it's because the relationships that are lingering in that way are the ones that are really important. If it wasn't important, they wouldn't be coming and talking about it in therapy. Or they wouldn't be talking with another friend or wherever it's coming up. It's lingering because it's important. When the relationship's important, then we often feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
What if I say the wrong thing? What if I make them mad? What if they think I don't care? It's because they're so important, we get scared to step into that. If we can figure out a little pathway, it can open things up. It can clear that air or open up communication. But it comes with some vulnerability, which can be hard for a lot of us.
Absolutely. When considering the critical role of relationships, from personal connections to professional networks, do you all find different types of relationships have unique impacts on us?
Absolutely. If you think from a perspective of family relationships, they offer us historical context. They're our history. They are the people we share identity with here in a healthy family or a healthy-ish family. They provide us those roots, that feelings of belonging. I belong to this family. These are my people. Here's my history. Like, this is what I got from my grandmother. Here's why I look the way I look. It provides us that sense of connection from that perspective. From a professional perspective, a lot of times our relationships with our coworkers, supervisors, of the hierarchy at work, they help us connect to our sense of purpose. Why are we doing the work we're doing? It provides us intellectual stimulation. It provides us a sense of competence. There's a survey done by the Workforce Institute, and they found that managers impact employees' mental health 69% more than their doctors or therapists, or even the same as their spouse or partners. That's the reason that a lot of people will leave a job. They might love the work, but they don't love who they work for.
Mhm.
So,
I would say across the board, leaving jobs in particular, as Kim said, the vast majority is because of relationship issues. And whether that's a supervisor or colleague, it's typically not people leaving their field. It may not be people leaving a particular job place or institution, but it's getting away from people or relationships that are not healthy for them.
Could you all tell listeners the different categories of relationships?
family, friend, work, intimate partners, or personal relationships. That's the way we chose to break them out when we did our
Okay, gotcha.
series.
I think as we age and go through different paths in life, for some people, those work relationships are going to take up a much bigger space than from other folks. Some people keep strong work boundaries and don't really socialize outside of that. For other folks, work maybe their primary kind of friendships. It's one of those areas where diversity among relationships can be helpful when there's some sort of strain or some issues. It can be really helpful for us to have other spaces where we feel supported and cared for. If work is a struggle for whatever reason, if I don't have some robust sort of friends, family to lean on, an intimate partner to connect with, I'm going to probably feel that strain in an even bigger way. If that's where I'm getting the majority of my social outlet, that's where I'm getting the majority of my esteem, it can cause some challenge when something's going off track in that area. Again, that's true for any of those areas. If my romantic partner is my primary person and that's who I'm meshed with, I'm deeply connected in, and there's an issue there, and I don't have friendships or connection with a family, we're going to feel a bigger impact on our well-being. We're going to feel that challenge even more. Again, it can still be difficult, but I think it puts it in an even more elevated space if we're struggling.
If you think about the idea that our supervisors have such impact on our mental health, sometimes we don't have the choice to leave. So if you think about it from that perspective, it's like, I cannot change who my supervisor is, but I can do things to help me be a little bit more resilient in the face of having a difficult relationship with a supervisor. As Rhonda said, I do go lean on my friends, coworkers, or my family. I spend time and energy building those pieces up so they can help me be resilient in the face of a struggle with another relationship.
When people come to you with work struggles and relationship struggles, what's something you suggest to mitigate that?
I think one place to start is acknowledging what I have control in the situation and what do I not. I think truly, as the very first starting point, I will draw the line down the paper with them. Okay, let's start listing. What do you have control in the situation? What do we not? Because it's easy when we're in times of overwhelm or heightened stress to get into cognitive distortions, the black and white thinking. This is all bad. I can do nothing about this. I have no power at all. There may be some things you got some power on. So trying to slow down, break the situation apart a little bit. Often the things we want control over are not the things we have control over, but at least starting with acknowledging where do I have some control? And then starting a plan with that. What am I doing with that? Do I want to do something about these things? Are there conversations I want to have?
I was going to say something similar, which is depending on the issue, is it something I can actually impact, change, or can I influence it? Because I can't make someone else do anything. I can barely control myself most of the time. So it's a fallacy to believe we can control other people, but we can influence their decisions. That's probably the most power we have. But even if that's limited, depending on the person and the situation, sometimes it's outside something I can even influence because maybe it's a bureaucratic kind of thing, even though it might be impacting me personally. I don't have any control over that changing, but my behavior and how I respond to that is in my control.
In today's digital world, social media and online interactions play a significant role in our lives. What are the primary ways these digital connections are impacting social well-being, both positively and negatively, and particularly for different age groups?
Today's digital world is reshaping our social well-being in many ways. It also depends on the type of social media or the type of digital world we interact with. But depending on your age group, it can really change. I think back from my own arc with social media, I had a Facebook account, maybe a little Instagram before COVID. But when COVID came along, how did we connect to the broader world? It was through social media. It was through this digital virtual world. Ron and I belonged to a book club together. We had book club over Zoom because that's the way you had to do things. I think we always think about the negative, like it's rotting our brain, it's making us disconnect, those kind of things. But it can also be the opposite as well. For all ages, it's given us that ability to have information. We have more access to diverse perspectives. There's lots of benefits to that. Think about the younger generations. That's where their identity formation is happening. So Gen Z and Gen Alpha, how many years of their life have they not had access to some kind of digital format? Gen Alpha was born with a cell phone in their hand or an iPad. Like the college students now do almost all their discussion boards online. All of that is connection. Relationships are happening in a virtual reality. From another perspective, the older adults, their abilities may be less inclined to be able to get out and do things they used to do and enjoy, but it's made them able to talk to their grandkids every day or read the story online. I think there have been a lot of positives to our virtual reality, but there have been negatives as well. That social comparison piece, like Instagram ready photos, parents on Instagram and all the things they're doing and all the wonderful things they're doing for their kids' child development. then you're a parent and you're looking at that and you're like, I fed them today because that was all I was able to do. This comparison piece gets in the way of how we feel. It can actually develop more anxiety around our ability to be good partners, good friends, because we see only the veneer with those relationships. We just see the picture. We see the beautiful picture and that fear of missing out. Oh, they're going on vacations and they get to do these things. How are they able to do that in their life? And I'm not able to do those things because, again, we only see one dimension of what's going on in someone's life. And we assume that their whole life is like that.
People that I see that especially rely on that digital world are folks that have any kind of marginalized identity or folks that are living in a more isolated space. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. If there had been internet when I was growing up, I could have found some of my people. To be able to find community that is real and supportive, and again, we know the pitfalls, but I know for a lot of our folks, especially if they're feeling isolated in their life, digital communities can be a space of opening up, understanding of differences, whether it's somebody like me or just me wanting to meet people outside my typical circle. It can be an incredibly meaningful thing. I think, especially for younger folks, for some of them, it can be a life-saving thing. Finding people they can relate to and affirm who they are. If you're feeling at your gut, because we're talking about some of those potential pitfalls, if some of that resonates, if you notice you're lingering a little bit longer than you wish you did on those perfect pictures and wishing that could be your life, that might be a red flag to talk about that a little bit. Come in and talk to somebody like me or Kim. We're not going to say, oh, never go online again. We're going to talk about how do we balance that with some other things that bring us a healthier perspective. We're seeing a little slice of life through that, but we're also seeing other parts of life. Look at our own life in a fuller way than just one picture.
I think from a mental health perspective, I think it's gone a long way to destigmatize mental health issues. Now, the flip side of that is there's been a lot of inaccuracy in the things that we've learned. There's always a video about this is what this means when you have this, and here's the things that you should do about that. The armchair doctors, if you have a health issue and you're like, oh, this is going on, and they're like, here are 5 things you should do, and none of those are going to your own doctor. That's a problem. But the flip side of that is we're talking about mental health. We're talking about the universal struggle that everybody struggles with. Sometimes they might have a mental health disorder, but sometimes they're just having a major life stressor right now. Just being able to say, hey, I'm struggling and you're struggling too. I don't feel nearly as alone.
I think that's such a powerful point. Because the other thing that I think can come up when we're in those struggles is sometimes we don't want to face people in our, and I'm using the air quotes here, real life. Like we're not looking to unpack something vulnerable with our family or with a friend right then. But maybe I can go into a group that's about this topic. I can go into a group where other people are dealing with whatever this challenge is, and I can start to find my way a little bit. It may feel safer to start there with some folks who are strangers on one hand, but also share some common situation. I think there's lots of ways of finding community. Again, if you read those stories or hear things like this podcast and you get that kind of red flag feeling in your belly, listen to it. Do we need some boundaries or do we need some limits? It's okay if that's one of our places we find community. It's okay if that's one of the places we find meaningful connection and support. It's no less real or valid than anybody else's approach.
On platforms like Reddit, for example, I think you can find people having tough conversations together in a cohort with the privacy of
Yep.
behind the keyboard. I think the important thing is they are having a discussion. That was overall a really balanced perspective on that. I would agree with the balanced perspective. Personally, I see social media and technology, even new technology innovations like AI, as new tools that we use. The internet and social media is another connection tool we didn't have before. And I think it can be used in very positive ways. For example, I've had access to seemingly everything as far as information goes. I've been able to learn things a lot faster, for example, how to play guitar than ever before. So I think that's really cool.
It is a tool, just like every other tool. I'm raging myself with this. But I remember the day of beepers. We had little beepers. All you had was a screen. I was doing domestic violence work back in those days. People were using beepers to harass each other and harass ex-partners. The most basic technology can be used for something productive and useful, and it can also be used in a problematic way. To me, it comes back to intentionality. Where am I going? How much time am I spending there? Who am I interacting with? What am I choosing to share or not share? With intentionality, that's where our control and power is. And we can choose how to step into that. But I think looking at it as a tool to me lets us interact with it in ways that hopefully can improve our lives.
The U.S. Surgeon General recently highlighted a loneliness epidemic as a public health concern. I was interested to learn, how do you distinguish between feeling lonely versus solitude?
There's that old saying, being alone is not the same thing as being lonely. If I was going to think about those two things, I think it's about choice. I can choose to be alone, but sometimes I can feel lonely, and that would not be my choice. I think it's very unwanted. It's often a painful feeling to feel lonely. I feel that lack of connection or intimacy. And maybe there are things I could do to improve my relationships where I would not feel quite so lonely. But it is definitely not something most people would say they want to feel. It's an unwanted feeling. But being alone, on the other hand, is solitude, that feeling of I'm communing with myself. I can choose to make choices about who I live with, how I spend my time. It's self-reflection. There's time for recharging and creativity. For me, alone or solitude is a choice I'm making to go internally, whereas loneliness is a state I don't really choose, or I would not want to choose for myself.
Kim, how can we develop a deeper connection with ourselves when we are alone? We don't feel like we're alone. We don't have that lonely feeling. We're actually enjoying that solitude.
It comes back to that ideal of intentionality. What am I doing with this time? Am I using it for self-reflection? Am I using it to just listen to the quiet or spend time with my cat because I don't want to have a conversation, which requires me to put out emotional or social energy during that period of time? I think finding ways you feel like being alone fills your cup is a good way to start.
That could be, everyone is going to have their unique things that make them feel fulfilled in that time with themselves.
And for some folks, if that's an area of struggle, again, that's a place where you may come talk to somebody like me or Kim. Some folks, especially when they've went through life transitions, maybe kids have grown up and they're empty nesting and they're trying to fill in their time, or maybe they went back to school and now they don't have school anymore and they've just got a job and they've actually got some time to have some alone time. If that feels uncomfortable, then it's a thing you can explore. And whether that's just reconnecting to things you used to enjoy or getting comfortable with sitting with your own thoughts. Sometimes that can be difficult for us if we're used to going or doing or feeling so productive, and that's where we're getting all of our steam from. It can be hard to shift into that lower gear where you can just sit with your cat and chill out and enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you're finding that's a hard transition, a lot of folks struggle with that. And I see a lot of folks really beat themselves up over that. Why can't I just relax? Or why can't I just figure out what I like to do? It's because often we're in such high demand in some periods of life that when those gears shift, it takes a minute to get our feet back under us and figure out, if I have an afternoon by myself, what do I want to do?
Is that a result of being alienated from yourself? Yeah.
It could be. I think it depends for different people. This is a really common thing that happens. Again, interests kind of wax and wane over time, opportunity, money, health, all those things impact our ability to do what we enjoy. If you're running into something where it's feeling like a little bit of a barrier, then sometimes it can help to try to unpack what's going on and how do we get around this one.
In an earlier discussion, you all mentioned core values were a prominent theme in every session in a relationship series. What insights from those sessions would be most helpful to share with listeners?
One of the things we recognized as we were putting together that relationship series was with any type of relationship, we may have points of conflict we're needing to navigate. We may find ourselves being more distant in those relationships, just having points of struggle somewhere in there over time. And one of the things we wanted to come back to was helping folks try to connect those dots between what their core values are and starting to actually name them. For a lot of us, we're operating off of these things, but we don't always have the opportunity to sit down and think about that or do an exercise where we bring that to the forefront. Using those core values can be a clarifying tool when it comes to managing conflict in the relationship. Are we in different spaces where there's something off track? Coming back to those core values. And when we find those are not in alignment, that can be the root of problems that are bigger than just we're disagreeing about this thing. or we're disagreeing about how to spend money today or where to go today. But a bigger kind of issue when we start stepping back and looking at what do we value. Lots of us have seen those lists. There's 50 values. Pick out your
Mhm.
top 5 or those kind of versions of that. There's no bad words on the list. There's nothing there that's, oh, that's horrible that Sebastian valued autonomy over family. It's not like they're inherently bad. What it does is it gives us some insight into where the conflicts are coming up. Where are we operating on different places? If Kim and I are best friends and we're struggling to spend time together, and she's gone back to school and she's buckling down and she's got this overwhelming schedule, and I'm an empty nester and I got all the time in the world, we might be great friends, but what we're valuing, what's driving our behavior in that moment may put us in a place where we're not on the same page. So that's a broad answer, but I think being able to step back and look at some of those values and starting to notice where are these things rubbing against each other, not in the way of I'm right, they're wrong, or vice versa, but where is the root of this miscommunication coming from? Where's the root of some of the challenges coming from? Kim, what would you add around that?
I was going to come at it from the perspective of work and core values. I like the word you used, which is alignment or misalignment. When our values are aligned with our work or with the mission of our employer, then we might have that sense of profound satisfaction, and probably our team is going to be more effective. We're all operating because there's our core values and then there's the group's values. And Rhonda talked about this earlier in intimate partner relationships. You both come in with your set of core values, but you also have where those are shared and overlap, and you lean on those. You will also say, okay, here's definitely a place we're probably going to have some perpetual issues around. We then decide together. Sometimes we go with one value and the other. That misalignment piece at work can be important because that's what leads to things like burnout, being frustrated, feeling disengaged. When I'm not engaged, I don't feel that sense of connection to my work, then it's going to be a whole lot harder for me to feel like I'm being effective. And part of that is also feeling like I know what my role is. I know what the values of this agency are. I know what the values of the work is, what our mission is. When I am aligned with that, I'm going to understand my role and I'm going to have much more satisfaction.
Absolutely. That's something that was explored in our occupational well-being conversation. The value alignment at work plays such a huge factor in helping us feel motivated, ready to show up, seeing ourselves a part of that bigger picture. Any closing thoughts you all would like to share with listeners before we sign off?
I think having those diverse relationships, being able to have different pockets of life that have different connections tends to serve us well. Mine don't have to look like yours, but having some variety in that is going to make for a fuller life and is going to make us able to handle adversity with more tools in our tool belt. The other point I will leave with is relationships are going to change over time. The space they take up in our lives, what our expectations are, how they work when we need to fine tune them or realign them. I think expecting them to change over time, regardless of what dimension it's in, I think it lets us meet that moment and recognize things that used to work a certain way maybe aren't working anymore. And it's time for us to do that realignment.
I would add the quality of your connections truly dictates the quality of your life. It's not important how many friends you have or how many social media followers you have, but it's about depth, authenticity, that sense of connection that truly happens when we feel that mutual support in our closest relationships, back to that interdependence piece as well, that impacts our emotional and mental health. So I would encourage people to invest in the bonds of their healthy relationships in their life. Maybe choose a few to divest themselves of as well.
Kim and Rhonda, thank you so much for your time on this episode. I think we covered a lot of really great points on social well-being, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient. This podcast is brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. We offer a wide range of online and in-person services to support the well-being of UK employees, retirees, and their spouses. You can find experts in mental health, personal resilience, nutrition, and physical activity. We're ready to meet you where you are and address your unique needs. To learn more about the work life and well-being services offered by UK Human Resources, visit hr.uky.edu/wellbeing. You can also connect with us on social media and YouTube by searching at UKY Wellness or by email at healthandwellness@uky.edu.